I just
Mara,
signed
start
in.
streaming.
Mara,
Welcome, everyone.
did Eileen sign up, Mara?
Yeah, I spoke to her earlier.
Okay, she's just texting me. Okay, whatever.
If she hits that link, she should be able to get in, Sue.
I'll tell her, thanks.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. We're going to give
Steve
people...
is getting logged in. He'll be here in a few minutes.
Perfect. We'll give people a couple more minutes to join and then start the meeting. Let's see. Just a little background. We will
We are on
start
YouTube right now, just so you know, and it's being recorded.
Yep. Thank you. We'll start with the public forum, and then we'll go into the presentation from the development team and the administration, and then we'll take the vote.
I gotta skip for a second. I'll be right back.
Plattsburgh State.
Some ground rules for the committee members. This is all new. I will be unmuting attendees in order of their public comment. I have asked that they try to not have too much duplication in what they say, and so have an order that they plan to speak in order to keep the flow going well. The first will be Sarah Pezdek, followed by Robert Barreo. So you all can get ready to speak first, although we have a few procedural things to do before that starts. Great. Jim is back. We will go ahead with the, well, do we have any? Yeah, and Eileen got on. That's great. Great, wonderful. We will get going with the call to order. This is the planning committee meeting of August 27th, starting at 6:04 p.m. via Zoom. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see. I'll have Kim, would you mind leading us?
I have the flag.
You just want us looking at you.
Ken or Kim?
Kim,
Kim,
Kim.
okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. We'll start with the roll call. Let's see, Council Member McPherson.
Ash McPherson here.
Yes, Councilmember Ash McPherson here. Great. Councilmember Steele.
Present.
Council President Mantello, ex officio,
I'm here, thank you.
also here. Councilmember Cummings, Chair, I am here. Also present, we have Councilmember Gully, Councilmember Zaluski, and Councilmember McDermott. We also have in attendance the Planning Commissioner, Stephen Stryker, the developer, Kevin Vandenberg, a representative from MJ Engineering, Jamie Easton,
That is correct.
and then a member of Hardigan Archaeological Associate. That's Justin.
That is correct.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here. We will get going. with
And
the-
Aaron Vera is here, the city engineer.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And Aaron Vera joined us. Thanks for being here, Aaron. Let's see. On the agenda tonight, for the presentation of agenda, we've got two items. One is just for introduction, the discussion, the proposed change of zoning for the parcel in question up in Lansingburg. And the second item is a referral of that to the Planning Commission. So both of those are on our agenda tonight, and folks are welcome to speak on anything on the agenda. So that being said, we're going to switch over to the public forum. I'm going to start unmuting folks one at a time. The first person on the list is Sarah Pezdek. So I'm going to unmute you, and then followed by Robert Barreo. So be ready to talk after Sarah.
Hi, Anasha, can you hear me?
I can. Thanks for being here, Sarah. You can go ahead.
Oh, I can't hear you now.
Oh, can you hear me now? You're welcome to speak if you're ready.
She appears to be muted.
Oh, hello?
Hi, go ahead.
I can't hear anybody.
That's weird because she's actually, her icon shows that she's muted and yet we can hear her. Very strange.
Yeah, very strange.
For folks, bear with us. This is our first attempt at
Can you
at
hear
a-
me
at
with
the
a
webinar
thumbs
model.
up? Okay. Should I get started then? Okay, sorry about that. I can't hear anyone. Good evening, members of the Troy City Council Planning Committee. My name is Sarah Pezdek. I was born and raised in Troy, New York, and I'm here this evening as a representative of the Friends of the Moheganatuck, a local community organization composed of concerned citizens from Troy and surrounding communities, and working in partnership with the Indigenous community of the Schaghticoke First Nations and their partners. I am here this evening to speak in opposition to the proposed development of 1011 Second Ave, presented by developer Kevin Vandenberg and MJ Engineering and Land Surveying. The mission statement of the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area Management Plan, in which Troy is included, is to recognize, preserve, protect, and interpret the nationally significant cultural and natural resources of the Hudson River Valley for the benefit of the nation. This plan was prepared in part by Hudson River Valley Communities Council, at which time the council was headed by then Executive Director and current Troy City Council President Carmela Mantello. She further reiterates in her 2020 legislative address her previous and continual efforts to work with partners to further the mission of, quote, protecting our natural and cultural resources, end quote. The proposed development plan brought to the City Council Planning Committee this evening not only works against the efforts of Troy's own City Council President, but directly contradicts the 2018 revision of the City of Troy's Comprehensive Plan, and therefore the Council should not refer this to the Planning Commission. I want to bring to the attention of the committee 6 key points why the request for change in zoning code for the parcel in question cannot be granted. 1. Requests for change in the zoning code must be denied because it is inconsistent with the 2018 comprehensive plan. 2, requests for change in the zoning code must be denied because it does not meet the economic viability and burden criteria. 3, Requests for change in the zoning code must be denied because it is inconsistent with the surrounding neighborhood land use. 4, requests for change in the zoning code must be denied because it has negative impacts on the environment, public health, and natural assets of the local neighborhood and city overall. The waterfront forest is a unique space in the city for respite and an important aspect for property values in the surrounding neighborhood. Additionally, forested areas are critical in mitigating the urban heat island. Developing this property as proposed will increase the urban heat island effect. As stated in the comprehensive plan, quote, the Hudson River has been negatively impacted as a result of industrial and urban development, end quote. A development of this size in this location threatens the health of the river with pollution and waste runoff. 5, requests for change in the zoning code must be denied because of its impacts on the historical, cultural, and archaeological heritage, which has been recorded in detail in several studies that have been done on the site since 1983, which were funded on both the state and federal levels. 6, the request for change in zoning code must be denied because of the incompatibility with state law regarding spot zoning issues. The development brings undue economic burdens and strains on the city's public service and infrastructures, schools, garbage, and road maintenance, whereas these infrastructures are present at other vacant sites and properties. Together with the supplementary evidence that was provided to the committee ahead of this hearing in writing, this establishes clearly that the rezoning must be denied and therefore the matter should not be referred to the Planning Commission. Additionally, I'd also like to make note of the following reasons why this proposal should not be approved. It is generally the impression that projects such as this will provide tax revenue to the city. However, calculations provided in written form clearly that increased costs for public services and infrastructure maintenance far outweigh the expected tax revenue associated with this development by at least $500,000 per year. It is common practice for development projects to seek tax credits and tax breaks, eliminating most, if not immediate, tax revenues. This is also the case when developers make promises not to seek tax incentives, example, after the sale of a development or project, or when project leadership changes. This example has been recorded for this particular developer as well. Additionally, the supporting infrastructure that will be needed in order for the development of this magnitude in the proposed neighborhood will end up coming from Troy taxpayers, an unnecessary burden when there is greater need to repair the current infrastructure problems plaguing Troy. The city of Troy and previous developers have had a history of eradicating and erasing sites that were not only important to the local indigenous nations of the area, but which also became places of respite for the growing communities of Troy. Diamond Rock, another site of indigenous significance in Lansingburg, was bulldozed to accommodate 2 residential developments, erasing indigenous history and removing a beloved public green space for Troy residents escaping the sprawl of the industrial downtown. Let us not keep repeating these mistakes, especially when approximately 2 blocks from 111 2nd Ave is an abandoned Price Chopper on the waterfront with current infrastructure in place that would better support a project like this. As stated by Steve Strickman, Commissioner of Planning and Economic Development for the City of Troy on January 27, 2020, quote, closure of the Lansingburg Price Chopper presents a unique opportunity to improve the Lansingburg commercial district and increase public access to Troy's waterfront. Potential conversion of this suburban style shopping plaza into a walkable urban mixed use district, enhanced by CDTA's bus rapid transit line and other improvements, will bring further investment to the Lansingburg neighborhood, end quote. Why ruin one of the last waterfront forests in Troy when there is already a space ripe for this development so close? Representative of the Friends of the Moheganatuck have spoken with a representative of the owners of the property who mentioned that they still retain the deed to 1011 2nd Avenue, though Mr. Vandenberg is under contract and the sale of the land is contingent upon approval of this project. Let it be known that Mr. Vandenberg does not yet own the property in question. During the conversation with their representative, the above was noted, in addition to their consideration of alternative proposals for the property that would better serve the needs of the community should Mr. Vandenberg's proposal be denied. Alternatives that were discussed included community waterfront access, historical and environmental preservation, community cultural education programs, in addition to improved sidewalk access, all the while protecting the historical, cultural, and environmental aspects of the site. I would also like to take a moment to remind the council that as elected officials, you are here to represent the needs of the citizens and communities they make up in Troy, not to pander to the needs and wants of developers, even if they claim the potential of additional tax revenue to the city. The evidence presented here and in the supplemental documentation that was sent to the council back these reasons as to why the development proposal and zoning change must be denied, and provide sufficient evidence that this proposal does not serve the greater good of the citizens of Troy and the neighborhood in which the development would take place. Please keep in mind that money is not the only thing that leads to a strong, vibrant, and viable city. In conclusion, I and those I am here to speak for today firmly oppose the development proposal prepared and presented by Mr. Vandenberg this evening. I implore this committee to deny his request and vote against the motion to refer it to the Planning Commission. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll next move on to Robert Barbero, a representative of the Schaghticoke First Nations.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me,
Why
right?
can't I hear anything?
Yes. We can hear you, Robert.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the time. My name.
Sorry. Robert, let me give you.
You dropped the wrong one.
I dropped Robert instead of Sarah. Sorry about that, Robert.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. Starting again, my name is Robert Mucaro Borrero, and I'm here sharing this testimony on behalf of Sachem Hawkstorm of the Schaghticoke First Nations and the Schaghticoke First Nations, Inc. The Schaghticoke are an indigenous peoples or Native Americans of the region who are opposed to the development and the rezoning proposal for 1011 2nd Street or Avenue due to a number of factors, but amongst the most important is the historical significance of this land. The property has a great historic and cultural significance for the indigenous peoples of the Mahicanatuck Valley, which include the Schaghticoke First Nations, as well as the Munsee and Lenape peoples. This land was a permanent and semi-permanent settlement of various groups of Algonquin-speaking indigenous peoples and included a critical ceremonial ground. The land was also a quarry for the production of tools and weapons, particularly arrowheads, and still contains a significant portion of indigenous artifacts. According to the statements made by the developer during the May hearing of the Planning Commission, a majority of the test wells produced a significant amount of artifacts. So the property's historic and archaeological significance is reaffirmed by several studies, including historical and cultural assessments by a number of different entities. And so far, there's what we can see from this research is there are strong indications that despite the rest of the property not having been independently examined, important artifacts and archaeological potential remains for the rest of the property and beyond. Despite the verifiable privately contracted surveys, research in association with these reports indicate inadequate assessment and archaeological recovery on the site. The development of the site and space can negatively impact and threaten this cultural heritage, as increased foot traffic, artifact hunters, and pollution can all contribute to major disturbances and irrevocable loss. Additionally, it's also important for the council and community members to note that according to state and federal law, a DEC SPEDS permit is necessary associated with the ground disturbance of this project exceeding 1 acre. So other state and federal agency permits or funding may also trigger SHPO involvement, and a coordinator of the archaeological unit program confirms this in an official correspondence with a member of the Friends of the Mahicanatuck from August 12th, 2020 regarding this site, and he states, given the archaeological sensitivity of 1001 2nd Street, the SHPO will likely request an archaeological survey to document the archaeological sites that are located within this project area, if a survey has not already been undertaken. Well, Scotticoke First Nations is aware that there's a wide scope of legal grounds for why the requested change in zoning code cannot be granted, as stated in a written supplemental evidence submitted by the Friends of the Mahikanatuk prior to this hearing. Further, we are also aware that there's other locations in the area that could be better suited to the development being submitted. Finally, Scotticoke First Nations has communicated with a representative of the property owner. We understand that if the council does not approve the rezoning and development request, this land will remain with the current owner. The property owners are open, as we understand, to preserving this, to exploring the preservation of this land and exploring a larger, more community-oriented vision. In closing, Scotticoke First Nations is calling upon the council to consider that instead of destroying the last tract of forest on the waterfront in Troy, we could work together in collaboration with property owners and local community groups toward providing a unique opportunity for racial and environmental justice, education, and sustainable tourism in the area. I thank you for my time, and the full message was submitted prior to this meeting, so I thank you once again.
Thank you, Roberto. Our next commentator is Jeffrey Avenzio of the Scenic Hudson. I'm going to try promoting you to a panelist, and I'll see if that allows us to talk, and then I'll be able to bring you back down after. So let's see if this works.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks for being here.
Muted, and I even see you can see me. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address the Planning Committee of the Troy City Council. It's an honor and pleasure to be able to speak to you tonight. My name is Jeffrey Enzavino. I'm the Director of Land Use Advocacy for Scenic Hudson. Our mission is to ensure that tomorrow's Hudson River Valley from Manhattan up to the Capital District to the Adirondacks is environmentally and economically sustainable, and that its capacity to awe and inspire residents and visitors is preserved forever. We just want to, I won't read the statement, I think, because you already have it. In the interest of time, I'll just say, for the reasons that are indicated in the statement, the property is indicated in the Troy's comprehensive plan, Realize Troy, adopted only 2 years ago, presumably with a lot of thought and effort and public participation went into that plan. That plan indicates that the land use on that site and around that site should be low density residential. Right now it's zoned R1, which is low density residential. And it would be a mistake to rezone it to higher density plan development district as has been proposed. This also is against New York State city law that requires rezonings to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. In addition, the Realize Troy also identifies 7 major reinvestment areas in the city. 2 of these are in Lansingburg district. One would think that a lot of thought went into identifying the places in Troy, in Lansingburg, that should be the subject for rezonings and upgraded land use. This site was not identified as one of the primary major reinvestment areas. So for those reasons and everything that has been expressed in the statement that we've submitted in writing, Scenic Hudson recommends and urges the Planning Committee not to refer this to the City Council for rezoning and to leave the zoning as is. Thanks very much for this opportunity to address the Planning Committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
That's what I was, Chair.
I just wanted to say hi to Jeff. Jeff and I worked together in our prior life. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Carmela. It's so good to see you.
Ditto.
Thanks for doing such a great job in Troy. I visit the city occasionally, the farmers markets, last year, not so much this year, but we love Troy, and it's exciting to see the things going on. I was at the Ingalls Avenue boat launch ribbon cutting last year, and anything Scenic Hudson can do to help with open space issues in Troy, let us know.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair.
All right.
Chair.
Yes, council member.
I'm
Dr.
going
Sanders.
through and I'm writing down the names so I know who's talking and whatnot. Are we not doing addresses or anything? Asking what they're,
We have that in the record. We're not publicly announcing it, no.
can we say where, are they from Troy or where they're from? I'm not getting any of that when they're.
Yep, so these first four are representatives of the tribe and various other interested parties. And then, yes, I can start announcing the neighborhood at least if you would like.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
So the next speaker will be Philip Oswald, an attorney representing the Friends and the Schaghticoke First Nation. And Jeffrey, I'm gonna put you back down into attendee.
Good evening, members of the committee, and may it please the committee. I'm here on behalf of the Friends of the Mohegan-Tuk and the Schaghticoke First Nations. I had previously submitted a written submission in opposition to the proposed amendment that is currently before the committee tonight. And I understand that it will be entered into the record. Again, to save time, I will not go into detail through that statement, but I'm of course more than willing to answer any questions or any comments that any of you might have. But other than that, I just want to say that one of the most distinguishing factors about this particular proposal is the archaeological, historical, cultural significance of this particular site. And I've handled a variety of zoning cases involving spot zoning. And in a lot of those cases, a site that has this type of significance isn't present. And yet those cases are still held to be spot zoning. I think this is a factor that places this clearly at a different level. And I think that it is especially deserving of protection rather than a rezoning that would be for a use that I think is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan as has been discussed. And I think there's a wealth of evidence in the record before the committee detailing the significance of this particular site. And I think that for those reasons, as well as those that were submitted in my written submission, I would respectfully submit that the proposed amendment be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. And our next representative will be Elizabeth Moran. Liz Moran, resident of downtown Troy. I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Go ahead. Oh, and I guess before you get started, I'll mention the next speaker will be Jessica Bennett. So get ready on the line there, Jessica. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. I will be offering written testimony as well. So I will be offering you all a summary of that this evening. So my name is Liz Moran. I'm a City of Troy resident. I live in downtown Troy. And I'm speaking today to voice strong opposition to the proposal to amend the City of Troy zoning map to rezone map parcel number 70.64-11 on 2nd Avenue in Troy. So I'm urging the committee today to vote against the motion to move this proposal to the Planning Commission. I happen to have a near decade-long career in environmental policy, specifically regarding climate and water. For the past 5 years, I worked at Environmental Advocates of New York, directing their water program. And now for the past 2 years, I've been directing the environmental policy program at the New York Public Interest Research Group. As others have mentioned today, this parcel is the last remaining natural untouched forest along Troy's Hudson River waterfront. And as a result, is already offering crucial benefits for the entire city. So allowing this proposal to move forward would eliminate those environmental benefits and jeopardize the city to more flooding, increase sewage overflows, and also increase the city's greenhouse gas emissions. And again, as others have mentioned, this project would also be a deep injustice to the Mohican people who have historical ties to the land. So in my testimony, I will detail these concerns further, but to offer a little bit right now. So the reason this project would threaten the city with more flooding is because it would be eliminating a natural buffer. Forested areas offer a way to naturally absorb water. And I don't think it's much of a secret that that part of Troy in particular has already suffered from a lot of flooding. The Price Chopper is closing down because of the flooding that would take place in their parking lot. I was a Lansingburg resident at one point in Troy, and I know from firsthand experience that it's not horribly unusual for 2nd Street along the river to experience flooding. So removing that forested area could make that worse downstream as well. Additionally, with the climate crisis, the Hudson River is anticipated to have significant sea level rise over the next 50 to 100 years. However, we're already starting to experience that more. We also are having more frequent 100-year storm events. That's also going to lead to increased flooding. So having those natural buffers are so important to prevent increased flooding to the area. Additionally, these natural areas are crucial tools for climate mitigation. It's a very common basic that we learn in science class in school. Trees and green areas and green spaces absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and serve as natural carbon sinks. And I'm very pleased the city of Troy is a climate smart community and has ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this proposal, by cutting down that forested area, would directly negate the city's goals as a climate leader. Additionally, if this project were to go forward, it could significantly strain the city of Troy's sewage system. So the city of Troy relies on a combined sewer system, which takes both our stormwater runoff and the wastewater from homes, and is already a very strained system. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, in the capital region, the city of Troy tends to contribute more sewage overflows than the other cities. And that's not the city's fault, that's the design. We happen to have a lot of outfalls. So this proposal would be a very large building with potentially a huge number of units. So that could strain the system and lead to more sewage overflows, which of course further pollutes our precious Hudson River and also can contribute to more greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, as others have said, this proposal does seem to go against a number of provisions of the City of Troy's comprehensive plan. That concludes my key points. And like I said, I'll provide written testimony with citations and reports and more information for you all. Again, I urge you to vote against this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Rhea Drysdale. Rhea, I'm promoting you. You can go ahead. Oh, actually, Rhea, before you get started, I'll just mention Lee Nelson, you're next, so get ready. All right, go ahead, Rhea.
Thank you very much. To the City Council Planning Committee, thank you for this public forum. My name is Rhea Drysdale and I reside at Massachusetts Avenue near Freer Park in the city of Troy. I'm speaking tonight in support of the Mohican people and asking you to protect the native, historical, and culturally significant land located at 1011 2nd Avenue along the Hudson River in Lansingburg. Please do not authorize the rezoning of this ecologically significant waterfront forest. Troy does not lack in potential vacant, abandoned, and derelict property ripe for redevelopment in more opportune locations for residents, investors, and developers alike. There is so much land already in use and in need of rehabilitation and renewal. Please bring this opportunity to places where it is needed most. The Mohican people are working to designate this property as a historical site, which could bring a community-focused cultural center or other services to the area, allowing for more education and awareness, especially for a community that often lacks in those opportunities. The community should invest in discovery of the Mohican people's history and preservation of and education about the native environment of upstate New York. Troy is a working class developed city. We have few opportunities to visit lush native spaces. We should preserve this land. Please do not rezone this area. Encourage developers to find another suitable location that is in need of affordable housing and growth. Thank you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Rhea. I realized I skipped Jessica Bennett, so I'm going to go back to you, Jessica. And then we will move on to Lee after Jessica.
Chair.
Yeah, sorry, Jessica Bennett is a resident of Lansingburg.
Hi guys, thanks for taking the time to listen to us. I'm in agreement with everything that was spoken about before me, and I'm not going to waste your time repeating it. What is pressing to me right now is, so I live at 1009 2nd Avenue, so immediately adjacent to this property. And what I spent my last evenings in the last week since Friday when we got the plans was walking around and speaking with the residents directly of the neighborhood, a number of whom's property actually, also is either across the street from it and abuts it. And aside from one person who did not say she was in favor for it, every single person that I spoke with is against this proposed development. I had no idea there were so many lifers in this neighborhood. So many people took the time to tell me their stories of using this property from when they were children. And these were not young people, riding bikes, access to the waterfront, fishing, and none of them knew of what was being proposed and did not know about the meeting today. I got 46 signatures from neighbors. And at the moment, we have over 277 people who have signed a petition against this proposed development online. I want to be clear, I am not anti-development, and I'm not even opposed to something like this going into Lansingburg, excuse me. But the idea of taking down the last 10 acres of forest in the city, on the riverfront, of course, just seems insane to me. We have the Price Chopper right downtown, 3 blocks away, as well as Leonard Hospital. And I want to just share a little bit with you what I heard from all of the neighbors, because if they are not able to join us, I thought it was important to share some of what they said. There was an overwhelming dislike of the idea of an apartment complex in our neighborhood. A lot of neighbors told me about how they lived downtown for a long time and actually moved up here to have that sort of single family, small neighborhood feel. Everyone is upset about the traffic and the idea of adding 200 or 240 apartments above the public transportation. So it really would necessitate a car. The addition of that traffic is just overwhelmingly people do not want that. There's a feeling of being let down with the infrastructure of Troy. At least half the people I spoke to spoke about the flooding in front of the Price Chopper. And it was almost like there was a disappointed feeling of, they want to do this up here. We can't even leave the neighborhood without having to pull through a gas station unless we want to flood our car. There is a lot of vacant property in Lansingburg, and I know the city is doing a lot to address it, the zombie properties, but we all know the cycle. Vacant properties bring urban blight, and when you drive down just 2nd Avenue, which is our main thoroughfare, you can see plenty of them. We would love to see something like this, a vibrant new community, go in and address that at the same time. I would like to see this proposed amendment be denied. And ultimately, I would like to see the wishes and desires of the citizens of this neighborhood that will be affected, myself included. And we would like to see this go in somewhere else and not take down forest and community access to the water and green space to have that happen. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Jessica. Our next speaker will be Lee Nelson. resident of downtown. Lee, I'm going to promote you now. And after Lee, we have Melissa Bromley of South Troy, so you can get ready.
Hello, hello. Can everybody hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good evening, members of the Troy City Council Planning Committee and other guests. I hope everyone is doing well and are healthy, especially during these times. I'm speaking to you regarding Resolution 91. My name is, as I said, Lee Nelson. This month, I'm going to be receiving my doctorate from RPI. I've lived downtown for all my time here, currently living on 4th Street. And even though I'm graduating this month, I'm actually staying in the city that I now love and have members of this committee to actually thank for making my time and new home here so rewarding over the years. I have lived and worked in Rensselaer County for 5 years, and during that time, I've had the pleasure of enjoying many of the gyms that are speckled throughout the area. One such gym is the Last Waterfront Forest along the Hudson River in the city of Troy, the piece of property under question this evening. I know this piece of land well since I go on frequent, sometimes daily walks along the Old Champlain Canal in Waterford, often stopping at the parks along Waterford waterfront that look back over the Broad Street Bridge on the development site under question. And I visited the site on a number of occasions with my dog and absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorites. As you all know, within the last year, 3 different housing developments have already begun within a 1.5 miles between the Potenscale South Troy Canal and Hutton Street. While these developments seem to promise tax revenue, there are several critical factors that determine whether an additional development project will in fact deliver the hope for increased revenue and neighborhood benefits. While it is true that such developments can bring critical resources into neighborhoods and the city overall, this depends on being able to differentiate between, like just the normal short-term and long-term outcomes and costs. Criteria that are useful for making such an assessment have been identified in the New York State Smart Growth Criteria, as well as in the 2018 City of Troy Comprehensive Plan. The proposed development of tax parcel 70.641-1 does not meet, unfortunately, the criteria when it's properly assessed. And I want to draw your attention to some of the critical factors of this project. Importantly, there will be an increase of the tax burden for the city and the neighborhood in question. Because of the time, I will merely implore attending to one of the best metrics for community-based cost-benefit analysis, namely that based on school district expenditure per pupil and the estimated number of family units in the proposal, in the project proposal. I've been asked, of course, to remind the City Council that of the supplemental evidence submitted by the Friends of the Menhikatuck that have been made available to Council prior to this meeting, which offers a detailed and very, very conservative calculated cost estimate associated with the increase in public service spending associated with such a development. Because of the time allowed, I will merely refer to what other speakers have spoke on and move on from there. But I do want to, and hopefully this person is already known by some of the council members, the name Charles Marin of the Strong Towns Project, who has done extensive work determining what types of projects actually help and which are unfortunately a fool's errand. Marin has written that despite the obfuscation of modern accounting practices, the math equation for local government is fairly straightforward. A public infrastructure investment must generate enough public wealth to pay for the ongoing replacement and repair of that infrastructure, or if it is to be sustained, it must be subsidized by a more financially productive part of the system. This common rule of thumb associated with this very basic calculation is a ratio of 40-1, namely 40 private investment to 1 public investment. Being required for a development to generate positive revenues for a city when all associated costs are incorporated. This project, when one goes through such calculations, approaches a ratio of much closer to a 1-to-1, which is just simply not sustainable over the long term. While developers often pay the initial development and construction costs, the cities, and importantly, the City of Troy will be responsible for critical maintenance and public service costs. These include things such as increased road maintenance and traffic management costs, increased resource strains for public school systems, with the influx of large amounts of new residents in a short period of time, as well as increased costs for other public services, such as like the fire department, garbage collection, public safety, et cetera. Marin writes in a critical study that has been provided to the council, as well as in writing by the Friends of the Mexicatuk ahead of this meeting. One such quote included, and that I'd like to enter the record here, reads, "Rapid growth provided the local government with the immediate revenue that come from new growth, namely, permit fees, utility fees, property tax increases, sales taxes, these very short-term and immediate benefits. And in exchange, the city takes on the long-term responsibility for servicing and maintaining all this new infrastructure. The money comes in handy in the present, while the future obligation is, well, a long time in the future." Marin concludes saying, "This thinking is how you end up with $2 of public infrastructure for every $1 private investment. This is how you spend yourself into bankruptcy," something that unfortunately the city of Troy has a long history of grappling with. When the full extent of the costs are taken into consideration, including maintenance, public infrastructure, and public service costs, the proposed development will in fact have a negative impact on tax revenue for the city. Indeed, leading economics and development experts recommend prioritizing development of existing infrastructure, property, and sites, especially vacant sites in economically devastated communities. This has the benefit of minimizing public investment needs and strengthening tax revenue in short as well as long-term timeframes. But the above assessment are not merely Marin's. This is also has been indicated in the 2018 Troy Comprehensive Plan, which identified the need to develop, in particular, vacancies, or at least engage with the problem of vacancies in Troy. Troy's high vacancy rates are also contributing to neighborhood destabilization. There are approximately 23,100 housing units in Troy, and approximately 2,100 of these units, or about 9%, are vacant and unused. Prospective residents are deterred from purchasing homes in neighborhoods with high vacancy rates, as they are perceived as areas with higher crime and where continued divestment may occur. These conditions have resulted in a weak housing market and low housing value compared to other areas in the region. Studies explicitly and repeatedly show that because of market competition and resource constraint associated with the development of land, routinely and structurally prevent the development of other vacant but already developed sites. The proposed rezoning under question tonight will in fact make such problems worse, not better. In the immediate proximity of the development site proposed, there are several vacant properties, including several that have been identified by the comprehensive plan as development priority focused areas. This means that the proposed development and the associated rezoning is incompatible rather with the responsibilities and legal requirements that must guide the City Council's committee and Planning Commission in their decision. It's for these reasons that the requested rezoning must be denied on economic and legal grounds, as well as according to the city's own assessment and findings within the 2018 comprehensive plan. Closing, allow me to summarize. There are significant grounds to deny changing the zoning code for tax parcel 78.64-1-1 from R1 to P. The apparent justification for the reasoning is flawed. And as studies have shown, the long-term cost of such projects outweighs the short-term quote-unquote gains. For these reasons, Resolution 91 should not be passed. The proposal submitted represents yet another housing development, one that promises gold, but unfortunately is merely glitter. The proposed changes would result in a net loss of city revenues at the expense of one developer's gain. I implore the council to reconsider and to deny the proposed rezoning. Thank you for your time and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Lee. Our next panelist is Melissa Bromley of South Troy. I'm going to promote you now. And after Melissa, we have Christoph De Maria of South Troy as well. Hi, Melissa.
Hi. It's good to see you, City Council people. I've been writing letters recently, but it's nice to be able to show you my face, my humanity, and tell you in person that I appreciate the time that you put into your work. But it's also a little bit more nerve-wracking to talk on the spot. Like so many that you've heard from tonight, I'm speaking out against the proposed development No hard feelings for Mr. Vandenberg. It's just, thinking about the city of Troy, who stands to benefit from this project and who stands to pay the cost, how many will benefit and how many will pay the cost. How much vacant housing do we have in the north part of the city already? How many more new, I haven't seen the proposed project, but I don't think it's luxury housing. How many cheap buildings do we need put up to house people that we don't even know are going to come? There's a lot of vacant property there already. We know that natural landscape is one of the best defenses that we have against climate change, not just for the water retention in a natural landscape, which people have already spoken about, but also for the heat index. There was a New York Times article like today or yesterday about how urban inner cities are baking. It's dangerously hot already. And we don't want to lose the cooling effects of the trees and the greenery and the surface area that exists on land that's undeveloped like this. We don't need it. This is an easy win for the city council from my perspective. Don't need it, don't want it, give the people what they want. And I think that we all agree, even Mr. Vandenberg and everybody, that this city has a really proud history. Troy has a lot to be proud of, and that starts with the Indigenous people who cared for and about the land that we are all on right now for thousands of years. Let's follow the lead of the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohicans, who have submitted comments in opposition to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And our next speaker is Christophe DeMaria, followed by Steve Pierce. Christophe, I'm promoting you now. Again, Christophe is a resident of South Troy.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate, as Melissa said, the ability to see the council and to talk to you all in real time as opposed to the written word. I'm Christophe DeMaria. I was actually born here in Troy, and I'm a current resident of South Troy and a business owner in the city. I also lived in Lansingburg for several years, actually right across from the waterfront, which on the other side of the river has been developed into apartments, I imagine much like this one, and can say that I was very disheartened to see that development. I also used to ride my bicycle regularly through that trail and stopping at parks along the way, like Lee had mentioned, and was again dismayed to see how much more traffic there was, how much more nature was completely obscured by the fact that there are giant buildings that honestly don't do much for the taxpayer. I want to say that I reflect and agree with all the sentiments that have been expressed by everyone before me, and note very succinctly that not one person has spoken in approval of this zoning variance. So I also come out strongly in opposition. I really feel that the city of Troy can continue to invest its development in rehabilitating vacant, abandoned, underutilized pre-existing spaces, and can promote the enjoyment of the waterfront as well as the cultural heritage, and provide not only respite, but the possibility for education and for solidarity with the Schaghticoke First Nations people and the Friends of the Mahanotuck and their partners. I want to bring to mind that not only spot zoning has become an issue here, that it seems unlawful for this particular zoning change to exist since it is not consistent with the Realize Troy 2018 comprehensive plan. I want to bring particular attention to something that hasn't been mentioned, which is principle 4, which is to preserve the city's parks, open spaces, and cultural assets. Based on the evidence that has been submitted to all of you, as well as everything I've heard here tonight that you have heard as well, this particular parcel seems to me like an open space and cultural asset. So why would we change that in exchange for a pilot programmed development that will create negative environmental impact, negative effects of gentrification on the surrounding community, and continue those impacts in the long term for what I feel is a very short-term benefit. So all in all, I completely stand here in solidarity with everyone and absolutely oppose this, and encourage you to please do the same. Thank you for your time and attention, everyone.
Thank you, Christophe. Our next speaker is Steve Pierce. I'm going to promote you now. I think that will be our last speaker. The only other person on here is Therese Swota, who I believe is not planning to speak. But if you do want to, feel free to press the raise your hand button and we can add you to the public forum as well. Otherwise, we'll go ahead with Steve Pierce.
Whoops, I was playing around with my background before I came here. I guess I'm going to go with what I got.
Stop video.
I don't think that's going to do it.
Underneath it.
So I just want to, first of all, congratulate you on your Zoom innovations and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Steve Pierce. I came to Troy 30 years ago for my PhD from the Department of Science and Technology Studies at RPI. I now work in Troy and own a home on First Avenue in Lansingburg. I would like to urge you all to vote against the Lansingburg zoning change request on tonight's agenda. 1011 Second Avenue is an incredible piece of land. It's easy to see why a developer would like to build hundreds of apartments there. For the same reasons, we should keep the parcel undeveloped and open it to the public. There's nothing like this property in Troy. We have Riverfront Park, we have boat launches, but this is the last sizable spot on Troy's waterfront that preserves the Hudson River's ecosystem before industrialization. I know you often hear from residents opposed to development projects who offer no ideas for what might be better. That's not the case here. A large number of people organized very rapidly to oppose this development, and they have already built alliances with local, county, and statewide environmental organizations to explore preservation of this land for public use in perpetuity. The long-term value of this property to the people of Troy as undeveloped land far outweighs the short-term benefit of yet another high-density housing project, particularly when there are so many other blighted spots in the city, including hundreds of vacant buildings that beg for redevelopment. Why eliminate one of the last pristine places on the Hudson River, one rich with natural beauty and human history, when we have the ability to preserve it for our children and their children yet to come? Don't do it.
Thank you, Steve. That will conclude the public forum. Unless there's anyone else who would like to raise their hand, we'll move on to the updates on various city planning projects. Commissioner Strickland, are you ready to present a few updates for us?
Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Ash McPherson.
before you start going into the other stuff, would you want to just continue with the ordinance and hear from Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Eastman and seeing we have all
How
the
long do
other
you think your
information up
presentation will
front?
be?
Pardon me?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. How long do you think your presentation will be, Steve?
Well, my presentation at the end will not be very long, maybe 10 minutes. I'm just going to give a quick summary of each of the topics that are on there. So I think there's plenty of time, and I actually anticipated that we would talk about this a little bit right now. So I will let Mr. Vandenberg present the proposal. Again, this is just there's a lot of good points that were brought up today, and a lot of points that really need to be further reviewed. So the intent of tonight's meeting was to refer this to the Planning Commission so that, because they have the experience in reviewing proposals, they can order the necessary studies, they know the environmental review process as well. They have legal counsel there that can look into each of these issues as well. I would point out that the planned development district is allowed by New York state law as well as City of Troy law, so it is not spot zoning, and there have been a number of cases that can attest to that as well. As far as the comprehensive plan goes, there are I would say that is something for the Planning Commission to review as well. There are many items in this process or in this application that further support the comprehensive plan, such as creating public access. There is no public access there right now, connecting neighborhoods with the Greenway. So we have an opportunity here to create public park and Greenway connections and a sidewalk down to the city. So there are a number of things that are supported in the comprehensive plan as well, and that would be something the Planning Commission would balance. And again, this is not city open space. Certainly it is in the city. It's not city controlled. So it would be just as easy for the developer to clear the land and put single family houses there as well. So that is an option available. And certainly I understand and hear what people are saying, but I think that it's really for the Planning Commission to review these items, look at it, maybe make recommendations, either approve it, deny it, recommend a different configuration. But the issues such as stormwater runoff will all be addressed by them. Archaeology is really controlled by New York State as well, and there's a full recognition that that needs to occur as well. So just a couple points I wanted to make, but again, it's just a recommendation to the city council, to the from the city council to the Planning Commission, is not an action tonight. So with that said, unless you have questions for me, I would ask Mr. Vandenberg to talk a little bit about the project and what they've done so far.
That sounds great.
Hey,
Mr. Vandenberg.
Steve, thank you. This is Jamie Easton with MJ Engineering. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jamie. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you for the brief summary. Certainly, as Steve mentioned, Council, that this is just a recommendation to the planning board as we move through these steps. The public certainly has lots of questions and make valid points in which we will eventually need to fully address as we go through this project. But the big thing about a PDD as we go through this project is that some of the elements on this privately held land could be incorporated into the project site. So there's opportunities here versus, that we could take advantage of. And that's what we look forward to later on. Certainly, stormwater is a concern. There's requirements by New York State DEC that governs those requirements. Sewer and impacts on sewer was mentioned on the CSO system. We actually have done a study. We've actually met with the county. We actually know what the problems are and how to correctively fix those problems. In regards to really taxes and things like that, a lot of people, I have not seen other people's formulas or anything else on impacts, and so I can't attest or deny what they're saying. But realistically, for this project, everything is maintained privately within the site, the roadways and stormwater management system and things like that. These are mostly going to be 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. That's typically the process of there. So there's not a lot of school age kids associated with that, which also then have a tax burden associated on the school base. So typically for over 100 apartments, typically when you have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, you typically see in the range of 10 to 15 kids per 100 units that you would normally see for school age kids. In regards to water, obviously there's water right there. There's a brand new water main that actually goes from there over to Waterford. I'll have Justin speak about that process, that the site has been previously disturbed and there's steps that we need to go through for disturbance because of the archaeological nature of the project site. But there are steps that are required by New York State law that we have to follow. And Justin can go into that a little bit more. So a lot of the financial impacts that some people were mentioning, I don't know what formulas, like I said, they were looking at or whatever, but most of the stuff is privately maintained. And because we're connecting directly to the sewer line going out, which is owned by the county, there's not a lot of infrastructure or I'll say future tax burdens to the community based upon the proposed infrastructure and how the project is set up. Certainly, I think that conversation can happen a lot later on. Some people have mentioned, preserving the land. It helps, prevent flooding, and it helps out with CO2 emissions and all those things. Those are certainly factually correct. But 11-acre parcel of land next to the Hudson River in general does not do anything globally to really change those impacts. The other thing about this project site, it's so elevated above the Hudson River. It's approximately 20 to 30 feet above the 100-year floodplain, that because of that, there's no this area doesn't provide a flood protection or whatever it is downstream or anything like that. The land is just, engineering wise, it's just too high. I certainly am aware of the impacts on basically the old Price Chopper site down the road. I certainly, 7-8 years ago, Price Chopper looked at, with MJ Engineering, redeveloping that parcel of land, but determined that it really was infeasible due to many situations. And one of it has to be that it's in the 100-year floodplain and it's relatively low, and approximately you'd have to bring in 6 to 8 feet of fill across the site to really bring up an elevation building in that location. I know from talking during that time, way back when, there was also proposed improvements to help alleviate some of the CSO and stormwater problems in that location due to the fact of Second Ave, consistently floods in that location. So I am aware of that. So at this point, again, it's just really where we currently are, Council, is that we're just really looking for a recommendation to the planning board so that these conversations can continue on and that we can develop a global plan that will work with everybody. And that's what Kevin's main goal here is on the project, and develop something. We certainly know there's going to be a lot more engineering questions in which we will address at a later time as we get into the real design based upon the planning board comes back and says, we want less units, or we want this or that, we want this to be incorporated into it. This plan will develop over time based upon public input and city input. At this point, I'll turn it over to Kevin, and maybe Justin, after Kevin speaks, could speak a little bit about the Archaeo process and the history of this parcel in an Archaeo sense. Thank you, board.
Kevin, you can go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Justin from Hardkin and let him go through the archaeological stuff that's been done, and I'll speak after him. Thank you.
Great. Justin, if you would like to speak about that, you can go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. So I will try to do two things. As a couple of the speakers, both in the public, Mr. Strickman and Jamie have alluded, this is consideration of the archaeological and cultural aspect of the site is part of a process that the development team, is in no way suggesting that that this is not an item that's being looked at that's of concern, nor that we are at the end of what that process is. So first, what I thought I'd do is just give you a real brief what the process typically is, not specifically just for this site, but as practiced generally in the state. And then I can also talk briefly about some of the work that's happened here. So there's various laws that apply for considering impacts on cultural resources. There's the National Historic Preservation Act, which is often referred to as Section 106. There's a New York State Historic Preservation Act, which is often referred to as Section 1409. And the State Environmental Quality Review Act also includes archaeological and cultural resources as one of the potential impacts that are considered in the review of the project. So as this project were to proceed, as has been alluded to before, there are different triggers from the agencies that are involved that would initiate involvement from the State Historic Preservation Office for review of the project. Typically on a site, we would go through up to 3 phases of a process. The first, the phase 1 is a consideration. It's a presence or absence sort of thing. Is there a site of cultural and historic or archaeological interest on the property? We already knew because of the prior work here that that was the case, that there was a site present in this whole geological formation along the eastern side of the Hudson, pretty much from where the Price Chopper was around the bend in the river up into Pleasantville. Well known for many decades. The second phase, we call it a site evaluation. It's intended to assess how intact is the site. Has it been disturbed by modern or historic period developments? And does that site meet certain criteria for significance? And if it's significant, we refer to that as being National Register eligible. And then the third and final phase that some properties may encounter of work is what we call a data recovery. The data recovery, when there are going to be some impacts on a significant site, is typically the collection of information about that site. Also, as part of this process, avoidance of the site is considered. And avoidance, tonight, some of the comments have talked about avoidance as if it's the entire property. Like, there's a site here, it's significant, so you should avoid any development on the property. In practice, oftentimes avoidance may be identifying the most significant components of the archaeological site, and to the extent feasible, configuring the project to leave those areas unimpacted and developing the portions of the property that either have no historic deposits or deposits of less significance or less integrity. So on this particular property, again, as several people have alluded, there is a history of study here that goes back several decades, looking at these quarry sites that were extracting stone material for use in tool making. All through the whole region, these types of activities have been documented. On this property in particular, for the water supply that the EPA put into place before the PCB cleanup of the Hudson River was commenced, the EPA was looking for a location across the river, which is at this site. And they used directional drilling to actually get beneath the river, which required them to have fairly large drill pits and receiving pits on the two sides of the river. So our two sites were at on the Waterford side at the waterworks and this property here. Because they're considering engineering issues and geological issues, the EPA initially had us examine more of the site, a larger area than what their impacts ultimately were, because they were doing their engineering design. So in around 2010, a significant amount of work on this property was done. The site was determined to be National Register eligible, so was accorded a status that acknowledged it was a site that had significant potential to yield information about past peoples and their occupations on the site. And on the portion that EPA did impact for their directional drilling pit, we did that phase 3, that data recovery work, and produced a multi-hundred pages long, did some pretty extensive public outreach, public speaking on the results of our studies. And the collection was ultimately received by the State Museum and is in their archaeological collection. So that's the history prior to Kevin's involvement with the site. So approximately probably 10 months ago or so, Kevin approached my firm about the site, knowing about some of the work. And right from the very first conversation, we were discussing the fact that at least on portions of the site, there's a significant National Register eligible archaeological site. And we developed a plan to help him assess what the situation looked like for the rest of the property that had not been studied in detail. So we extended the area of study from that work that was done for the EPA in 2010 to cover the remainder of the property. And we did identify some areas with really significant deposits that we've recommended would warrant more work if they cannot be avoided. We also identified large portions of the property where there is either no artifacts or that have had subsequent disturbance. So there's a sewer outfall, there's the area disturbed by the EPA water line. There are some spots that look like maybe at the past they've been used for storage of soil piles or something. And there's some area where the topsoil had been removed or displaced for some purpose that's not clear to us, is probably a disturbance that's many decades old. We could not identify it in aerial photography going back to the 1950s. But so there's some areas of the site where any cultural deposits that were there are now gone. There's some areas of the site that appear to have not had the archaeological deposits. So our work is about really focusing in on the areas that do have significant site-related deposits. And then as the project proceeds forward, engaging with the permitting agencies, engaging with SHPO, there will be consultation with tribal representatives to provide input on the work that's been done by my firm and how the project is configured and what impact that will have on those deposits. So we view that we're very early in the process. Again, this decision made tonight is not does not reflect that the archaeology concerns would be moot or that this process would be done. We're very early in that process of considering the impacts upon the historic resources and finding a way to minimize and mitigate those.
Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Gully.
Justin, help me out here because I'm a little confused. Of course, I don't know a lot about the history of the Indians that traveled up and down the river. And I certainly don't know a lot about archaeological value. But I'm a little confused. This is an 11-acre parcel that has a large structure, Hannaford on the left, and it has single-family homes on the right. I don't think the Indians were just contained to this parcel. So how did these other pieces of property get the ability to build on that land if there was an archaeological, I can't even say it, but a great value there for the history? How could they build on there if this was such an important piece of the puzzle here?
Some of it has to do with, I can't speak specifically, about the Hannaford, for example, just because I don't know what happened in that case. But a lot of it has to do with the age of the development. So for example, the State Historic Preservation Act only dates to 1980. Before that, the National Act is 1966. But then your project needed to have required a permit from a federal agency to trigger that law. So, some of these developments that went into place, either just predated or didn't require the permits that would trigger that compliance. As Mr. Barrero had said earlier, involvement from DEC is something that would trigger the State Historic Preservation Act and would require all these reviews now. And also just want to say that you're absolutely right. The site was not limited to current property. We've looked at properties, to the south as well. The site continues there. And from the work done by others further to the north, we know it continues there as well. But why some of these developments got to do it probably mostly has to do with that they occurred before the legislation was in place, or the permit was of a type that it didn't trigger the need to comply with that legislation. Ultimately, though, this process is not, that I laid out, it is not about, in and of itself, is not about deciding whether or not you can develop on a site or not. It's about saying, if there's a significant property, those impacts should be taken into account in decision-making. And to the extent they're still going to happen, collect information about it before the site is impacted.
And just for the record, the site that you described, Councilman Gully, between the Hannaford and the parcels, I believe, Justin, did you investigate that one at all, or did someone else? I believe that one has some restrictions on it, and the one we're talking about now is one that's further south, further north.
I'm not sure.
The site directly adjacent to the Hannaford is vacant as well, and I think may have some similar historic.
I think
concerns.
we did some work there as well, but you know, we've done.
I haven't looked into it. I was told by a neighbor that they were restricted from any possible development on that site, but again, I will have to confirm that.
That part doesn't sound right to me. I mean, what occasionally does happen is, and if it's the parcel I'm thinking about, it was a case of saying the cost associated with doing all these archaeological studies increases the cost of my project, and I decide it's not viable anymore. It's not that there's a prohibition on the property. It's another constraint on your development and potentially another expense to do these sorts of studies. If it's the parcel I'm thinking about, the way I would phrase it is just that the developer decided not to proceed because they didn't want to incur the costs associated with doing archaeology.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Welcome.
Any other questions from the council, or should we move on to Mr. Vandenberg?
I have a couple questions, Mr. Chair, but I'd like to hear from Mr. Vandenberg first. Thank you.
Great.
Carm, I'll be very brief too. And the first four speakers, I don't really, they're not really local residents as much as the last seven were. And I'm gonna, because the two the archaeologist and the engineer that we have, I'll let them talk about the nuts and bolts of the situation here. But I'd like to address just the second seven people. I'm born and raised in Corliss Park on the other side of the hill from where this property is. I reside now at 439th Avenue in North Troy. And one of the underlying things that I thought I kept hearing from people was, we've got other areas that need other areas, you know, lots and stuff and blight and all that. And Mr. Pierce said he came to the area 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I started my first house in Troy. I hate to admit I'm getting that old, but I'm actually, my son Joe is a second generation who just bought a house from the city of Troy at 510 6th Avenue. He's done it over. I've built probably 30 houses in Troy. I was trying to figure it out last night. We've bought 3 lots from the city of Troy in the last year, 2 on Manor Boulevard, of which we've closed on one house we started already there, and we're closing on another house in a couple of weeks there. I'm pulling a permit right now for 562 3rd Avenue to start a house there, and we've bought 2 more lots coming up. So I do recognize that there's a lot of lots throughout the city and everything like that, and I take advantage of them. As far as Red X houses, I've heard about them too, but my son just bought the 2 Red X's across from Testo's, and we'll be redoing them now as well. So I just don't want the impression of the people that beat it. I'm a developer that comes into town and takes off. I'm here, you know, and I'm born here and I'm raised here and I still live here. So I do recognize that there's other things in the city of Troy that need help, and we try to do them as well. This is how I make my living. That property is a beautiful piece of property. Everybody recognizes that. Unfortunately, I saw it first, I guess. It had the idea before everybody else. So that's the only point I want to make, is that I'm from here. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Council President, you had a few comments and then we'll start a queue.
I'm an ex officio, so I'll let the members, Councilmember Steele, Councilmember Ash McPherson, and yourself go first if you'd like. Otherwise, I can shoot away. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was mentioned this evening, my prior tenure as director of the Hudson River Valley Greenway and the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area, and also the canal director. I had the fortunate honor to work with communities all across the state on waterfront development, literally similar to this, hundreds of waterfront development across the state. And I think you guys had seen earlier, I sent an email to one of our constituents. Many of those waterfront developments started out just like this, a plan. In terms of specifics, it has a long road to move forward. And, you know, for me, at this point, I can't say if I support it or don't support it, but what I will say is I view it as a potential opportunity to incorporate smart growth principles, capitalizing on not only, you know, the economic development factor, but more importantly, protecting our natural, cultural, historical assets on this very important parcel. If it's done properly, if we could get, and I had already expressed to Mr. Vandenberg, if we could get some public access, water trail, land trail, things to that nature incorporated into the development project. And even though it's a private development, I can tell you all along the Hudson Valley, all along the canal system, private developers work with municipalities to incorporate public amenities and especially protect those natural and cultural resources. Saying that, I get it. I get how the constituents and some of the environmental folks, I work very closely with Scenic Hudson. Once it's gone for good. I get that. But at the same time, we don't own the property. And as Mr. Vandenberg mentioned earlier, this certainly could go to a different developer and be developed in something that doesn't include the city, and maybe something that is not maybe as open as this. Saying all of that, this has a super long road to go. I get that. Jamie, I'm very familiar with MJ's work. I was pleased to see that MJ Engineering was on board with this development. I have incredible respect for MJ. You've worked on various development projects all across the state, and I was pleased to see that. My question, a couple of them, Mr. Chair. Jamie, are you incorporating at all the LWRP program in this process? I mean, I know this has a super long path to go, but where's the LWRP through the Department of State fit in here? Hello?
Sorry about that. Took me a little minute to unmute my phone.
Okay.
I haven't reached out to them yet. In the property actually has rights all the way down to the water itself. Certainly, we envisioned, you know, the multi-use paths and the sidewalks all being part of the public amenities of this project and providing public access to the waterfront. But to answer your specific question, we just haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay. And I did talk to Mr. Vandenberg just about, it's so odd saying Mr. Vandenberg. Kevin and I went to Berg together, so full disclosure. But saying that, we did talk about potential water trail, incorporating maybe some motorized boating and canoeing, kayaking. So that certainly was a good feature. Also, the prospect of a trail. And what I would like to see, Jamie, I've seen other developers incorporate, it was mentioned, environmental education in certain parts, because certainly this 10-acre parcel has opportunity to incorporate some of those aspects. So I know it's early in the process, but I just want to make sure I'm very passionate about balanced development, and I see this as a potential opportunity, and I think we could seize upon that. And Scenic Hudson, they've worked with developers all across the Hudson Valley, and certainly, you know, we could use them and their knowledge. But Jamie, my request would be to incorporate as many, you know, environmental education, trails, public access, you know, in terms of how it would look. You're not even there yet, but the view shed certainly would have to be taken into consideration. So many studies may come along the way, but those are my requests. And one other question, Jamie, do you plan to do a traffic impact analysis, or, you know, would that be something the Planning Commission would suggest?
We anticipate doing that study, the traffic study, and I anticipate the planning board really defining the scope of how far they want me to look out. At, you know, what's the impact is, you know, obviously I think the impact is Second Ave intersection and Light, but the question is how much farther do you want us to go? And I think that's a question that the planning board can help define when we get to that point. But we anticipate doing a traffic report. And getting to some of your questions, we're kind of on the same boat. The educational portion of this, I think there's a huge opportunity that you could take advantage of. A lot of the archaeosensitive areas are actually really near the waterfront because that's where the rock outcroppings are. And if you have a trail next to it, you know, the informational ideas that you could put there, from an informational kiosk to everything from an educational standpoint, you could really enhance what that is as people are utilizing and looking at the beautiful waterfront. They can see what this item is instead of buried in the middle of the woods. So I think there's a long way to go. I think those ideas are great, and we're trying to incorporate all those things, but that's the potential I see in this property from a multifaceted point of view, then really making into, you know, 10 single family lots, mow down the trees, and we call it a day, and it's privately maintained. So I think that's where the opportunity for the city and the public to get involved in this project, it has a great opportunity for it. So.
Yeah, and Indian Nation, of course, also, and you know, and that's where I'm leaning. I really view this as a potential opportunity to really take advantage that hasn't really been taken advantage of in terms of telling that story. I'm sure that there's industrial revolution information that we don't know about on that site. So those are things that tend to vanish as it goes through the process. So we'll see where it goes, and we'll see tonight, you know, if this is passed or not. I want to make it also very clear to the public as an ex officio, I do not have a vote on any committee other than finance, but I am on all of the committees. And I did get a request, Jamie, I apologize, but seeker, do you plan to designate it as a type 1, or is that something, Steve, that the Planning Commission would decide? Somebody had asked.
Once we get to the planning process, you know, we will, at the planning board, we'll probably start doing the seeker long form, and then start working our ways through those questions to see where we fall into, and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
But I anticipate realistically a type 1 action.
That's what I would think. Okay.
And if I can add in there, the city council is going to have the city council will be lead agency on the zone change. The planning commission is advisory. So they will be reviewing it again. If the zone change goes through, then they will have their own seeker action then. But you will be lead agency on the zone change.
Okay. And, you know, as I said, there's a super long road ahead. And, you know, it's in the very, very early stages, but I implore Kevin, the developer, with MJ, and I'm not sure what firm Justin's from, but I implore that these, you know, protecting the environmental, archaeological, historical significance, environmental education, water, land trail, public access, viewshed, that all of that be taken in consideration early on in the process, and certainly working with the community, the Indian Nation, and really looking at this as a public-private partnership and not just a private development. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. I had a couple questions myself. The first is I did have an opportunity to go check out the site in person and was very struck by the topography of the site. It is dramatic, with some areas where buildings are proposed having maybe a 40-foot differential across the building. So I was wondering if Jamie or Kevin, Mr. Vandenberg, may be able to speak to the process and what's being considered in terms of what would it take to make this site development ready?
Thank you. It's Jamie Easton with MJ Engineering. We kind of anticipated that. So if you look at the concept plan, you actually don't see a lot of surface parking because a lot of the parking's underneath the building. And what I anticipated was taking advantage of that elevation change. So basically what would happen is one side is, you know, we would have the parking accessible, which would really face really Second Ave portions of it, and there would be other locations. While I'll call it the riverfront side, the building would look smaller in elevation. And again, that's that view shed analysis and that look along the riverfront. So those, by taking advantage of the grade, that's how we're going to accomplish it. Basically, you have to put it mildly, you take advantage of the grade by having like a walkout basement is the common way to describe it. Our walkout basement in this sense is a parking garage underneath the building, while there's a 3-story building on the opposite side.
So would you have to excavate to flatten that, and they would still have parking across the whole site of each building, right?
That is correct, but the contours are very linear to the waterfront.
Yep.
So there are some pockets of, you know, undulating land. There's no doubt about it. But our goal here is to really utilize the land and limit that disturbance. So again, the idea of along the riverfront, it's actually much, like you said, as you walk into the site, you actually go downhill a little bit, and then you climb up a very large hill, and you're basically looking over an escarpment over the river. So the idea here is to utilize the grade to our advantage. And so there's areas where there's going to be what we call, referring to in engineering world, there'll be cuts and fills, but we don't want to change the topography too much. And we'll be achieving that by basically, you know, having the building elevation on one side being taller than the other side. And that way we can, you know, have it seem more fluid as it was built to the site, as we refer to it.
Okay, so it's essentially built into the hillside.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, and then with regard to the marina, the maps I saw seem to suggest that area around there is pretty shallow, maybe 2 feet. Would there be dredging required for that marina? What's the plan there?
MJ will be doing a bathymetric survey, and we will be putting what you see right there is conceptual in nature. A DEC dock permit, if it's granted, they typically want it in 6 feet of water or deeper. I think the shallow area right there where we show a kayak launch, you know, as another public, you know, location where we could get out, seemed to make the most sense. Have one common area for, you know, for boaters, but we would probably, depending on where the depth of a bathymetric survey is, will really determine or dictate where we start placing our dock slips.
Okay, so that hasn't been looked at yet, but that would be part of the process.
Yes.
Okay. Do any of the other council members have questions for now?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Zawiski.
So I'm not on the committee, but I guess I do have one question.
Great.
I guess this is for Steve. Steve, you said that this is not spot zoning. To me, this seems to be the definition of spot zoning. So please tell me why I'm wrong and why this is not spot zoning.
Well, the New York State general city law allows for planned development districts to be overlaid on top of zoning to make better use of the land that's there, to either preserve resources and relocate buildings to other areas. I'm not describing this very well, but it's actually in New York state law that you can do these planned districts to make better use of the land. So that's a short answer of why it's not spot zoning. It's allowed by New York State. It's a large parcel of land. It's 10 acres, over 10 acres actually. And again, it's in the city zoning ordinance as well to allow for this.
Okay, I mean, I guess my response is I'm just not quite following that, because I just remember in my previous tenure on the council, we had some situations like this, smaller parcels, not 10 acres or 11 acres, but whenever we were discussing it with our planning commissioner, it was always discussed as spot zoning. So I'm just not quite following this.
And in those instances, really you're taking like a 1/4 acre parcel and you're allowing for use there You're not making a better use of the land. It's just saying, okay, you can have a gas station there in a residential neighborhood. That's spot zoning or a store. So it's really just a specific change of the zoning of that one small piece, incompatible with everything immediately adjacent to it. And it's not because it's making a better use of the land. It's not preserving any resources. And I can certainly get you a legal authority to give you an answer on that. I could actually
I actually would like more clarification, because I remember just being over this in the past, and this seems to fit exactly the mold that we applied in previous years. So I want to better understand that.
I can get you that, yes, and I will do that before next week's meeting if this gets passed tonight.
Okay, thanks.
Steve, this is Jamie Easton over at MJ. Steve, typically the threshold for spot zoning, I believe, I'm not an attorney, I know I've spoken to attorneys about spot zoning, but basically anything less than 5 acres in zoning, if the zone request is made to whatever, it's considered spot zoning. So there's an acreage threshold requirement. As this parcel is 10 acres, because it's over the 5 acre limit, I believe that's why by definition, it's not spot zoning also, besides the facts that what you said right there. So I think that's some of the legal requirements, but I think you can certainly pass that information along.
Let's see. We do have Philip Oswald, who was an attorney who wrote us a memo on this issue. I don't know if everyone had a chance to read the whole thing, but he's raised his hand in the comments. So I'm gonna go ahead and let him speak to us as well on this topic.
Hi, yes, just a short response. I think that the critical question, and I disagree with some of the comments, and I would be happy to, I would invite briefing from the option owner and the developer's attorneys, but I disagree. I think the critical factor is that you're talking about changing a property that is existing R1 to a planned development. And I think when you do that, there is an inquiry under the case law that has to be applied as to whether it meets the 5 criteria, which I briefed of being spot zoning. Certainly you can zone an area, plan district, if it meets that criteria or from the get-go, but we're talking about changing an area that has been zoned in R1 and changing it to a planned development area. And I think when you do that, it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It has to meet the other criteria. I think it's still subject to a challenge on spot zoning. And thank you for allowing me the courtesy of that response. And thank you again to the committee.
Thank you.
And I'll just add in, it's General City Law, Section 81F. So I'm looking at that right now. A legislative body is authorized to enact as part of its zoning local law, ordinance, procedures, and requirements. And I just did that. I just moved it as I was reading it. Hang on. Ordinance, procedures, and requirements for the establishment of mapping of planned unit development zoning. They're intended to provide for residential, commercial, industrial, or other land uses or mix thereof in which economies of scale create architectural or planning concepts and open space preservation may be achieved by developer in furtherance of the comprehensive plan and the zoning local law ordinance. So as I said, there's questions to be looked at by the Planning Commission about how this lines up with the comprehensive plan, but that is something for them to review. And I can provide you with more documentation as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Chair. Oops, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Councilmember. Pearson.
Steve, just so we're all clear on this, and I'm clear on this as well. Tonight is a lot of educational and information that we are getting. And by looking all through this, by sending it to, if it does pass and go to planning to review all this, all these questions are going to be looked at and investigated to satisfy all those involved, because the project cannot move forward unless everybody on the planning is able to get all the information together, correct?
That is correct. So they'll be authorized to get any necessary studies to review this further. We will have legal counsel as well for the BZA, looking at all the comments that have been made, listening to all the comments, and ensuring that whatever recommendation that goes back to the city council is justifiable and defensible. But there will, yeah, and the planning commission will likely be, if they approve this, making modifications to the plan. You know, there's things, well, they will be reviewing it.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any further questions on this? I could just, well, I guess let's go ahead and move them for further discussion amongst the council members, and then we will go ahead. So let me pull up my agenda. The first item on our agenda was the ordinance, which is for introduction purposes only. So we'll just read the title of that. Ordinance 67, ordinance authorizing amendment of the City of Troy zoning map established by Troy Code, section 285-49A to rezone tax map parcel number 70.64-1-1 on 2nd Avenue in North Troy from R1 single family residential detached to P planned development. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration. So that has been read for introductory purposes, and we will move on to the one resolution on our agenda, which is Resolution 91, resolution referring the Lansingburg zoning change request to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation. Council President Mantello at request of the administration. Do we have a motion?
I'll motion.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the discussion. Any council?
Chair,
Yes.
I would just like to go on that. There's a lot of information on here, and by moving this forward, we're allowing the Planning Commission to take it one step further and gather more information before a solid answer and vote to present it to the council. There was a lot of good points made tonight. There's a lot of questions that are still out there that need to be answered, and I'm looking forward to, if this passes, to hearing some of these good answers that I'm from the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Chair?
Yeah, Councilmember Steele.
First of all, I just want to thank all the folks who took the time to speak tonight, to email us, to the phone calls. There was an awful lot of information shared with us, and I'm very grateful for the time that they took to do that. I think I agree with Councilmember Ash McPherson. There's a lot more that needs to be done before this project can even be considered. So I will be supporting this moving on to the Planning Commission, because I think they have the expertise, the experience, and they know what needs to be done in order to protect the city's interests as well as those of all of the parties. So that's my feeling on the matter.
I guess I have one question I forgot to ask Kevin, or I guess the whole development team, which is just trying to get a sense of, it seems like quite a long and involved and costly process. Do you have a sense of what it's going to take to move this forward between now and the next time we see it? I'm just a look. I don't want to lead you on. I think this has a lot of problems, and I'm pretty concerned about it. And I think if my colleagues want to let you move forward for now, that's all right. But I know you're going to be investing significant money in doing these studies and in moving this forward. And so I'm a little concerned about that, and don't want to leave a false impression that personally I think there's very little chance I would be in support of this moving forward.
Are you talking now, Anash, or ever?
I think having seen the site, I don't see a viable plan moving forward. Maybe you can surprise us with the Planning Commission, but looking at the scale that you're talking about here and the impact it would have on a historically significant site, and more importantly to me, also just this is one of the last sections of natural forest here. And we've heard from representatives of First Nations who, you discounted in your comments, but they were here first. So I think their interests in this need to be considered by the council very heavily.
So you're in no period going forward, no matter what.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So we're not leading you on.
Okay.
Okay, that being said, we'll take a final vote. I guess we'll go with the roll call. Councilmember Ash McPherson.
I am going to, sorry.
Sorry, I realized I didn't ask for final debate. If anyone else had any further
I'll wait.
Comments or questions. Okay. And we'll.
You ready for me?
All right, go ahead. We'll vote.
I'm going to vote yes to move this forward, and I just would like to say that listening to all the speakers tonight with their concerns, I have the confidence in the Planning Commission to look this over and to make the adjustments that need to be made and so forth. I'd like to say with Mr. Vandenberg, I don't know him on a personal level, but I have seen his work throughout the city in many places that he has done. And he's a man to his word, and he stuck to what he said he was going to do. So I am anticipating him to do the same here. So I'm going to vote yes for this to go forward to the planning. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Steele.
As I said earlier, I'm going to support moving this forward. It does not necessarily mean that we even know what the final product will be or whether it will even exist. But I think it deserves the opportunity to be studied and reviewed. And I have, as my fellow council member says, I have the confidence in our Planning Commission and our to follow what needs to be done to provide a balanced project or not. You know, again, I'm remaining open, but I would like to move it forward in the process. So yes.
As I mentioned, I think this process will take a lot of time from our planning commission and from our staff and from lots of other folks moving forward, which I don't want to waste their time with a project that I'd rather see investment going elsewhere in that neighborhood. So, and for beyond that, you know, certainly have some deep concerns about meeting the comprehensive plan requirements on zoning here. So that being said, I don't want to waste people's time, and we'll vote no. That being said, the motion carries 2 ayes, 1 no, and we'll therefore go on to the regular council meeting agenda. Correct me if I'm wrong, it'll go onto our agenda next week, next Thursday, where this
No, that's
resolution will be.
incorrect. Our next meeting, our regular meeting is on September 10th.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Going to planning.
Labor Day. So we'll go directly to the regular meeting on the 10th.
Great. And then from there to the planning commission once again.
If it passes.
If it passes. Great. Then are there any further discussion on this item, or shall we move on to the updates and adjournment? Folks can stay on for a minute if they want to hear the updates from the planning commissioner on several other significant projects throughout the city.
Okay, and probably just jumping one thing back to that last proposal, we will probably put that on the agenda of the planning commission, the planning commission for the end of September. And if the vote does not carry, then it will be removed from that agenda. So it'll be published and announced anyways. And I'll speak with the city engineer, Aaron Vera, about that. But I think that's the way to go. I was thinking that the meeting was on the 3rd. So.
Yeah, and Steve, if I could ask, maybe put in bold so the public's aware, pending city council, regular meeting approval, September 10th. Okay.
Right. And I imagine that'll be a several month process there anyways at the planning commission. Obviously, it'll be several month process.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So I have on this agenda here, it looks like about 12 items. I'm not going to speak at length on most of them. I'm just going to give you a quick bullet updates, starting with Monument Square. So I believe everyone saw last week, we were the recipient of a $1 million Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for infrastructure, which is great. That brings to $4 million what we have in hand now to work on this project on the infrastructure and it allows us to start moving forward next year on taking care of some of the issues on the site. But first, Hoboken Brownstone has engaged their engineers, their design team, and they are really just getting underway with their design. They were slowed down by COVID. We had some issues with the land development agreement. So they are just starting they've just really a few weeks back started the process. And I anticipate that coming before the planning commission over several months in the fall of this year. At least that's what we're shooting for. So it does continue to move forward. And obviously the Northern Borders grant was a great thing. And we've got a lot more interest now from the state and from other agencies talking to us because it's always good to have a little additional money for this project as well. And I feel really optimistic about that. COVID response. So when the COVID episode started with the pandemic, we did create a website. We did outreach to businesses. So we had a lot of local businesses, 50 businesses that we spoke with as a direct result from contacting us from the website to talk them through the CARES Act and how to get additional loans. And so I think we provided very good support there, as well as we had some pretty good outreach because we were getting people from other areas of the state as well. And so we informed them who to talk to as well. We also did outreach with the businesses and locally that didn't contact us through that website, as many as we could. We also created a Rensco pandemic response team, which was the chamber and the city and the bid as well, and a number of other businesses and agencies. And with that, we basically developed the street closures on 2nd and 3rd Street. The CRC provided funding for that to the tune of $50,000, $10,000 of that, which is still available for other locations within the city. I have not, unfortunately, been able to get out really good outreach on that, but we have been contacted by some other businesses outside of the downtown to try and tap into that funding to deal with responses and ways to stay in business and remain viable through the whole COVID pandemic. The State Street redesign, if you remember, that is the changing, I know you remember, changing State Street from one-way to two-way between 1st and 3rd. And after the public comments, there were concerns about the parking. We have reviewed that in-house and with CHA as well, and the Troy Music Hall and the hardware store. And the solution we're going to come up with there is to make it still two-way, but to, instead of all the parking between 2nd and 3rd Streets being on the north side, it will be on the north side by the music hall and on the south side by the hardware store. And it will, with painting, there's enough room to jog it through that area. So I'd like to bring that back for the September council meeting. I don't believe it needs another public hearing because there's no discussion in there about parking. But if you want to have another public hearing because that's changed, I'm open to it. But so anyways, I'll prepare that legislation to come back to this city council. I don't believe that has to go before.
Can I just jump in here, Steve?
Yes.
Our chairman, may I please jump in?
Go ahead. Thank you.
I just want to say it's going to be on the September 10th regular meeting agenda as a tabled item, so it can just be untabled at that meeting. If Steve wants to prepare a new memo, support memo with a new drawing that I can send out on September 3rd, so if you could get it to me next week, that would be great.
Okay, let me see if I can get that in time for that. And I don't know if I've gotten the drawings back yet. So in that case, it may get delayed until October, but we'll see if we can get it on for September 10th.
And Mr. Chair, if I could jump in.
President?
Yep. On this one, I did say to Steve, because he had asked me my thoughts on a public hearing, and I just felt to be safe, since the proposal is changing, I felt more comfortable. We could have it before the council meeting and call it, for 6:45 or whatever, but I just would feel more comfortable and just to be safe legally. That's just my suggestion. I'm not going to haggle over it, but I do feel it probably should have a public hearing.
And if we're going to do that, then we'll probably at the September 10th, depending on what the council wants. If that's the case, then probably on September 10th, we would have to call for the public hearing and do it in October.
Well, we could call the public hearing prior and have it on the 10th. Talk about it.
We'd have to meet. We'd have to have a meeting to call it.
Yeah.
The public hearing. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Maybe we'll just have a public forum dedicated to it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Okay.
We've already had the public hearing. You could have public comments to make it clear that there's public comments at that meeting.
We could do that.
It hasn't.
Okay.
To the extent it has changed at all, it is just based on the existing public hearing. We had some comments in the previous public hearing about this issue, and then that drove some changes, but it wasn't that there's not, I don't think there's a substantial change to the project beyond listening to the previous public comment.
Yeah, we could talk offline. That we'll figure out a way to move it forward and at the same time ensure the public has the appropriate comment period. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. The Route 7 study with CDTC is nearing completion. So we have we came up with a lot of really good suggestions through this, which include a potential connection from Hillside North along an extended Rensselaer street, either a street or a path there, creating a pedestrian plaza on Hoosick Street where the street is right now in the median. It's like under the bridge, and creating a pedestrian walkway that actually runs up between the piers and continues over to 8th and creates crossing at 8th Street. There's too much really here to detail without visuals for you, but the point of this is that we have a plan that we are going to make available to the public for review online because of the COVID and the difficulties with having public meetings, starting September 7th through the end of September for people to look at and review and make comments. And based on those comments, then we'll take it from there and move forward. But I think there was a lot of good ideas that came up through this, and I think some of them are actually implementable this time. Obviously, there's a cost to everything, but I think we can move this forward and make at least the pedestrian access and the connection in the neighborhood Hillside and Hillside North better connected to each other and better, less inhibited by Hoosick Street and better connected to the downtown.
Even the bridge for now, though. No.
Chair, you have a question?
No.
Okay.
Only a snide comment. You can go ahead with Riverfront, with the marina.
I missed it, too bad. Okay, the marina seawall and actually River Part extension, which is the next item, are really in the same discussion here. They were all done together. So completely done. The lights are up. The poles have stopped shaking, which we were told they would do when the lights got on top of them. The catenary lighting is not up. That's not too far away, but the trail is open. It's gorgeous. The courtesy dock should be open, I think, by the end of this week or next week, and that is south of the Green Island Bridge. The marina will be another week or two before that opens. But so then we're getting some banners to put up. We'll have that all ready for an opening in September. But it all came out really well. I think the restaurants were happy the way the solution in the back there with the parking, and really it does look so much nicer as Chris Brown, not Brown, Chris Ryan said to me the other day. It looks like a summer resort out there. He was really happy with it.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say kudos. I'm so psyched. I was down there, and kudos to everyone involved. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it really gets me so excited to see good waterfront development and access down there. It's really nice.
Yeah, thank you. Todd Dickinson did a great job, and Deputy Mayor Krzyzewski as well. It was a great effort to get that done, and especially I love having the trail on the other side of the dinosaur now on the riverfront. That's so needed. Solves a problem that should never have occurred, unfortunately. Powers Park, we're waiting for the weather to cool down a little bit and get the concert series moving along up there. I know that's been really good, Councilman Golly. That fencing and sidewalks should be starting in September, so that project will get underway shortly. The sidewalks will be replaced with stamped concrete that is made to look like slate, and we're also coordinating with CDTA. So when we're done with that, if you remember, we did an MOU where they're going to put up we put the pad in, they're reimbursing us for those costs, and then they'll put the BRT stop in once we're completed. So that should mostly be done during September.
Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Steve, what are you going to do with the slate that's there that's going to be dug up on the one side, the sidewalk? There's slate there?
It is being removed and preserved. I can't give you the detail on where we are saving that, although I think we've done that in the past, so it's available to reuse in other places. It's expensive and a hard job to do though, however, but I think it might not be a bad idea to make that available to property owners if they wanted to do that, replace their cracked slate where they have it.
That's a good idea, because that's a lot of slate that's in that area that's gonna come up. I just don't want to see it destroyed, you know what I'm?
Yeah. No,
We saw that on the Congress Street project. A lot of slate got broken up, so it's good to see a little more.
Yeah. Yeah, I would
attention to
appreciate if
detail
you
on
could
this.
try to save it or figure out where we could use it in another spot. That'd be nice.
Right, okay,
Thanks.
you're welcome. And let's see, the industrial road, that's well underway, obviously, everybody can see there. You won't see much change over the next couple weeks. They're working on the infrastructure. They're pouring some sidewalks, I believe, tomorrow down more by the Alamo. But you can see the road and where it is, and we're on track to have that completed by November. We are still in the acquisition phase for phase 2. Hopefully to be able to get that bid out probably towards the end. I don't know. I don't want to promise anything on that, but we're still in the acquisition phase. But that the construction of phase 2 will certainly be within the next year or 2.
And then, sorry, I had included as part of that the South Troy remediation as well. Do you have any updates on the LDC parcels down there?
Yeah, so the LDC cleaned up the asbestos issue that was there. We removed the non-hazardous. I think I've talked about this one already. We removed the non-hazardous materials off, got better quotes, and we removed the asbestos contaminated material. Department of Labor is comfortable with that. So then we've been speaking with National Grid moving forward. They are gearing up to hopefully commence this fall with phase 1. There's 3 different sites of remediation. There's actually 4 because there's the riverfront as well. But the first site would be across the street from the ELOT building to the south. The second phase would be across the street from the ELOT building to the north. And then the third phase would be the road and north of the ELOT building. And so that's about a 3-year to 4-year project to get that cleaned up. But we're hopefully should have that starting this fall. We're just working on the licensing agreement with them now.
What about the city-owned, that last Burden Mill that's left down in there? I know we use it for some bulk storage, but do you know, has there any thought been put into what's going to come next with that?
Which property? I'm sorry.
I believe it's city-owned. The buildings that are down there, the large Burden Ironworks mill buildings, a couple of which have collapsed, and the rest of which are
okay. And that's city-owned, not local development corporation owned. We are working on we're looking at, a brownfield opportunity where the IDA is putting together a brownfield plan for the whole South Troy waterfront that will discuss that further and try and make more of those projects able to be remediated with tax credits or grants and then marketed out. So it's a slow process. The demolition of that building is extremely expensive because you can't abate the asbestos off the roof without having to do a demolition of the building at the same time. So you got $1.5 million demolition of a building because of the asbestos. And then you have contamination underground as well. So it's
interesting. It can't be abated without demolition.
It's going to require major brownfield credits and a developer with the use there.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay. The comprehensive plan rezoning, that
Wait, Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes. Councilman
Yeah,
Zalusky.
sorry, Steve, before you move on from the industrial road, so phase 1, you said you're on track for November completion?
No, for the road, for the industrial road.
Yeah.
Yes, we're on track for a November, December completion of that road. So that'll open up from Main Street to Monroe.
That's phase 1.
Phase 1. Phase 2 is from Monroe to Adams, and we're in the acquisition phase is still on that.
Right. So, okay, great.
So that includes purchasing part of the Bruno manufacturing building, removing part of it. It's a complex negotiation.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So back to the rezoning of the city. So that has been underway for some time. We have a few working group meetings going on right now. And what we're doing is We've got a rezoning of the city that fairly well reflects the zoning that exists right now, but we've modified it a little bit based on, you know, it's been modified a little bit. And then what we're doing instead of form-based code is we have an overlay on top of that. So you may have a multifamily district that's got one characteristic in one area and another characteristic a few blocks away. We have overlays that will go on top of that with clear building guidelines for developers. So they'll know where the building has to sit on the site, how tall it can be, how it looks. And we'll probably even get in a little bit into some kind of design recommendations for that as well. So we're nearing completion, or at least we're nearing resolution of that with the steering committee, and we're starting to work on the zoning ordinance now as well. I'm hoping to have the zoning ordinance, the language of that tackled by later in the fall, and then be able to start presenting that out to the public, going out to the public meetings in the neighborhoods as well. So it's moving forward. I don't think the city council will be acting on that until, you know, the beginning of 2021. It's complex.
But you would introduce the legislation as the starting point of the public education on that? Or start with the public education?
I think we start with the public education because there's going to be certain feedback. There's, you know,
yeah,
there's going to be
agree.
recommendations made.
Certainly eager to schedule a planning committee meeting to dive deeper into that when it makes sense. So let me know.
And that's a lot of work. I mean, that's, I don't know, you know, it's going to be hard to talk through that whole thing at a planning committee meeting. So it's going to take a lot of education in advance. We'll probably want planning committees attendance at some of the outreach meetings as well.
Certainly.
And any questions on that? Okay, I'll close it out with wayfinding. So I believe we did a pretty good distribution far and wide, asking people for comments on some of the design concepts for the wayfinding a few months back. Based on that, Tangram tallied the results, looked at them, made some modifications, presented them back to the committee, and they are now, while we are still refining them further, some of them are a little costly, so I want to try and bring down the cost a little bit on that. Well, actually, we don't know what the costs are yet, but some of the elements look a little expensive. But what the next thing is for Tangram to come up with, basically design the system, the locations, and provide the bid specs so that we can go out again and bid this out. And then we'll bid it out with an intended installation citywide in 2021. So we're moving along on track. We have the funding for that through the Troy Redevelopment Foundation and the IDA. And I think we have a great product. We're actually, you know, as we're starting to put signs up now, we're trying to mirror that as well as we can, like for the Marina District. So that's where that is. And
no,
I don't know if anybody have questions for me on any other. We have a lot of projects we're working on, which I didn't speak about, but those are the ones I think that were out there in the public that, you know, deserved an update.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilman Zaleski.
One question and that's it. Steve, the community builders project down by the old Irish Mist, what's up with that?
Well, I don't know what's up with that right now. So it came before the IDA in August, I believe, and there was no motion to move the pilot forward. So they are considering their options right now. So they're still in contact with me. It would have to be either whether they go for an as of right pilot or come to the city council or modify their proposal to come back for the IDA. Right now, I have not heard from them.
Okay, so for now it's stalled.
It's stalled. I shouldn't say I haven't. The project manager has reached out to me a few times because we talked about, you know, if this was going to go through making improvements on Canal Street, and so he wants to continue to meet there to look at that to make, you know, to kind of create or recreate the greenway there that connects, you know, First Street up to Third Street and by the park, and make some kind improvements on their behalf that benefit the neighborhood as well as their project. But right now, I don't have an update on where it is.
Okay,
But I would
cool.
say it's not dead. I don't think it's dead, but it's stalled.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Council President Tillo.
Yep. Unfortunately, my computer died, so I missed our wayfinding, but I did catch the beginning of it. And I just wanted to make sure, Steve, I had sent just a couple of recommendations from folks, like in terms of have the designations, and I apologize, I missed your update, but has the designations of various spots like Ingalls Ave Boat Launch, City Hall, has that been decided yet or not yet?
It hasn't, I haven't seen the formal, we were looking more at the actual design of the signage, and they will be recommending the locations. So I think I can present that to the city council for your review to see if, and actually to the public to see if there's anything we've missed. And I'm sure we will have missed something. So yeah, that's not prepared yet, but it will be forthcoming.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
That's it.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Okay, a motion to adjourn and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you,
Aye.
everyone.
No vote here.
Thank
I
you.
just want to say, I was doing some jumping because I have M80s going off on my block somewhere around here. So it scared the heck out of me. There was like 3 in a row.
It wasn't me.
No, it wasn't me either. I was scared.
Somebody's.
No comment.
Aye.
Thank you.
Hey, and PS, this was the best Zoom use of Zoom that we've ever had in terms of having people queued up to go and added to the meeting. So this is really we've hit a new milestone here.
We're getting it. We're getting
I
it.
agree. The webinar function works well, so hopefully we can.
Thank you,
continue to make
Mara.
it moving forward.
Thank you, Mara.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, I'm leaving 5 a.m. for Cape Cod. You cannot reach me until next Wednesday.
Enjoy.
Way.
Enjoy.
Good night,
Thanks.
everybody. Meeting's
Good night.
over.
Enjoy.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody. Have